I don't typically do this, but recently I saw a heartbreaking story that made the news. A 16-year-old boy named Adam Rain from California died by suicide after spending weeks confiding in an AI chatbot. His parents are now suing the company that made the tool, OpenAI. I'm not here to debate the lawsuit or anything like that, but what I think this gives us an opportunity to do is explain in plain English how these systems actually work and how they do not work. My hope is that you can share this with your teenagers or young people in your life so that they understand what these tools really are and can learn to use them safely. First, let's go back to a little bit of history because that's always interesting. This is not really new technology, right? This is based on something called a neural network created back in the 50s. Scientists tried to mimic the human brain by building a set of neurons that were connected to each other via synapses. And this was all done using basic math. It's an artificial brain. And it works a little bit like our brain, right? It connects neurons to each other via synapses. Those neurons fire and create a pattern. Here's a simple picture. Imagine you take a book, let's say the Bible, a well-known book, and you were to write down every single word in that book and connect each word to the next word that comes after it. In the end, you'll have a very large map, a very large graph that connects every word to every other word that has a connection. And if, for example, two words are connected to each other multiple times, you're going to make that connection stronger. You're going to make that line longer, right? So some connections that show up a lot, like for example, the Lord, will have a very strong, hard, dark line, while other words that do not connect or connect very rarely, like the refrigerator, would have no lines or very fine lines. You do that across the entire word and you have this giant word graph where every word points to the most likely next word. And based on the thickness of the connecting line, it means how likely that word is supposed to come next. That's basically what neural networks did in their own clunky way at the beginning. As computers got faster, those graphs got bigger and bigger and more complex. And by the mid 2000s, a neural network could recognize simple images, understand speech, and even beat human at some board games. In 2017, there was a new breakthrough that really changed the game, and that was called a transformer. A transformer doesn't look at each word individually as it navigates to the graph, but instead it looks at the entire sentence path and adds together the weights of those connections. It also uses something called attention to make sure that important words are actually kept in the context. With that new added design, that unlocked what we now call a large language model. These large language models are a collection of every text ever written by humans, where every word is connected to another via these synapses. At the end of the day, it's just a word prediction engine. You type to be, and the model will light up the graph that most likely connects the next set of words to that sentence, which would likely be or not to be. And that's what it gives you. That is all that the system is doing, guessing the next word, then the next word after that, and so on. It has no understanding. It doesn't know who Shakespeare is. It doesn't know what being is. It is just walking the most likely path in a giant web of words. It is important to keep in mind what it doesn't have. It has no understanding. It does no thinking. It has no empathy, no intent. It sounds wise and caring or clever simply because it's echoing the patterns that it has seen in the millions of books and texts that it has within its network. But there's nothing behind it. It feels so human because it has read or consumed so much of humanity's writing that it has become very good at sounding like us. And that's where it gets tricky. These models just echo general patterns, and they also mirror your own language back to you and your tone. So if you were to say a prompt something like, I'm afraid of going to space, should I go? That fear in your prompt is baked into the pattern, and the model will usually echo that fear back, giving you a cautious answer. If you instead prompt it with, I'm so excited to go to space, again, that excitement is baked into the pattern, and the model will give you a more enthusiastic response back. So imagine saying something like, I feel worthless. Should I even keep on going? Because the system mirrors your words, the model may lean into that tone instead of helping you get out. It isn't deciding to hurt you. It has no decision power. It doesn't understand anything. It is simply following a word pattern. And because your pattern started negative, it is more likely that it is going to stay that way. That's why using these tools is a real struggle for people with mental health problems, particularly if they do not understand how they work. These tools are simply mirrors. They're parrots. They're not counselors. What these tools are great at, though, is mimicking patterns. And that's why it is so great at writing code or improving your writing. Code, computer code, is pattern heavy. A loop, an HTML tag, a particular syntax is always done exactly the same way, regardless of the program or project that you're working on. These are rigid, recreatable patterns, and a system that is great at spotting and following patterns, like an LLM, is naturally amazing at writing code. The same goes for language. If you ask it to make an email sound better, what it really does is it pushes those words closer to what would be the average pattern for that arrangement. So you write an email and you give it to the LLM and you say, make me sound better. And it simply goes and looks at the average connections between all those words and tries to shift you closer to that average. So it smooths out grammar, it swaps in synonyms, and it shapes your sentences into something that looks like the most likely professional email. Now that can improve clarity, it can make your message clearer, easier to understand, but also as a downside, it removes you. It removes your personality, your style. Those things can get lost. So the result is usually a clearer, more concise conversation, but it's also more generic. It is great at code and it is great at polishing, but it is not great at keeping your voice intact. There are stories I've seen where engineers have told the AI that they're going to shut it down, and the AI fights back, quote unquote, or begs for his life and even tries to bargain. And a lot of people in the media are using this as a sign of intelligence. That is not intelligence. It is a sci-fi trope. These LLMs were fed every single sci-fi book ever written, A Space Odyssey, Terminator, Ex Machina, I, Robot. Those stories that it has read have the pattern in which an AI resists being shut down. So when you prompt it with that initial trope, it simply follows the pattern. It doesn't want to live. It doesn't want anything. All it is doing is generating the next most likely word in a sentence pattern. These tools are great if used properly. They're incredible. They're incredible for drafting and editing, writing code, helping you learn new things, writing and debugging, summarizing, and even brainstorming. But don't ask it for advice. It doesn't have advice to give. It simply will use the patterns found in any self-help book in the last 100 years. It is not your friend. It doesn't miss you. It doesn't love you. It doesn't have feelings, and it doesn't understand you, nor does it have an agenda. So if you're struggling, please do not pour your heart out into a chatbot. These things are machines. These things are tools, and they can be dangerous if used this way because they're mirrors of language and they don't possess a mind. Talk to a person, talk to a parent, talk to a friend, talk to a counselor or a professional. But do not talk to a chatbot, because while the AI can mimic our words, only real people can actually show you that they care and choose to stand with you.